Yeah, since the rise and fall... Let me, just... 1 second. Since the rise and fall expansion, I will say the AI has improved dramatically. They do a lot more stuff. They're a lot more, definitely a lot more proactive in spying. They're literally bombarding my city, Heidelberg, here with spies. And yeah, so I denounced Brazil for he keeps stealing my money. I denounced him, and I sent spies to his territory to steal my money back. So then when I looked at my options for Cassius Belli, which you get 5 turns after you denounce someone, or if they denounce you, these other ways of declaring war that have different levels of diplomatic warmongering penalties, meaning that, you get diplomatic penalties against other players. And I have the option to declare war of liberation because he occupies cities owned by my ally, Scythia. Also, denouncing him and even going to war with him, no one will mind because everyone else has denounced him except for Tamar, who is on unfriendly terms. So, I am going to move a few more things into place. I could declare the war this turn. I'm going to do that next turn, or maybe the turn after. I've been playing documentaries in the background lately, but since we're going to have a war here, I thought maybe I could just, you could actually listen to the game sound. I will have quick combat is disabled, so it'll be, pretty fun. I'm going to turn my mic off. Yeah, that music's just going to give me a headache. You know what? How about this? Turn your own background stuff on. I'm going to do my thing. I'll leave the mic on. You want something in the background? I can't. I'm kind of like, I need to figure out how I'm doing this. So, like, I kind of want to concentrate, and that's why I'm just... I have the game sound on, like just the sound effects, but not the music. I'm just gonna I moved some things into place, but there's a few more things I have to do. Should be able to do it all in one turn, two tops. Heck? Alright. Well, boys and girls, archaeological artifacts are in short supply these days, seeing as I've excavated practically everywhere. Whoever knew what I do for you? Who can I steal artifacts from? Better still away from Japan. This guy here, he must love him. Oh man, life is so noisy once you ever just want to be quiet sometimes once in a while. That's so hard to understand. So I'm serious about doing an all-out real conventional war. Try not to use like nukes and shit. Oh, like he ain't gonna fucking know what's up. I mean, I could be like no more obvious about what the fuck I bought. Like, if you don't catch on to it, you'll be the fucking wrong. He has a big army. This is gonna be a good war. I'm pulling out all the stuff. Well, kind of. Oh my God. Like I said, he has a big army, he has a navy, he has some kind of air force. I don't know how much of an air force. He has something. I'm bringing it all out. The best defense is a good offense when we got there. Now let's see what we do from I'm going to airlift units in too. But right now I'm moving Navy into place. Got my Air Force in place. I have a really, really, really insanely large Navy. And none of them are... They're on the other side. I got some shit here I'll bring down. Did you think I would be playing? I mean, come on now. This is going to be a real war. It's probably going to be the biggest war I've fought so far. I wish I would have. I wish I would have had more stuff over here, but you know, to come out from this end. But you don't have really. The only thing he has on the coast here is he's got this. You know, but oh man, that's a destroyer, not a destroyer fleet or a armada. I don't have any. No Navy infantry. Oh man. So it looks like on the west side I'm weak. We can remedy that. I know I made promises to somebody about, well, be careful. I'm gonna be able to make sure I stay in position to be able to nuke the shit out of Japan if they get airy, if they get, you know, rowdy and out of hand. So I need to bring some stuff over to that side. Doesn't mean I have to wait. I don't want to bring everything. I gotta leave some stuff to go. I know that I want to wait for it to get all the way over there, but he has some serious Navy. I need to bring more Navy before I can start this war. I know it's not really ideal to move this much of my Navy away from here. Come over here. Leave that guy there and that guy there. That guy there. That guy there. That should be enough. There's enough ships there to take care of Georgia if they... Oh, Georgia doesn't have a Navy over on this side anyway. Well, it'll be on the underside, isn't it? So really, I should bring this guy back in. Okay. Now, let's airlift some army units in. Actually, have some really experienced units somewhere, but again, don't really want to bring them into play. He's going to use nukes. Hold the good units back. I'll hold my best units back in case he decides to nuke. And then bring them in after he he does the new cool shit. Like, he ain't gonna fucking know what I'm doing. He'd have to be completely full of fucking more. Mobile Sam 2. Thank you. I'm interested in modern armor only. With at most one promotion. Although I have another whole other end to fill. Cool, flip them both over simultaneously. That's beautiful. Let's make sure. I might have to start taking the mech infantry over. I know this guy has 2 promotions. I'm thinking I will put him in a basket. All those tanks I'm moving over were all my conquering army. Helicopter army with 2 promotions up to the This city should not need that local salmon so deep in the territory. That's yeah, these helicopters and tanks were all my conquering armies. Well, one time when they returned to the garrison, and now they're going to be a conquering army again. All their promotions, okay. All that experience they earned from all those wars before. Oh, I didn't know that would be in the water. No, well, that'll be okay. After all, one of many. There we go. The problem is these tiles are in range of those encampments inside his territory. It's very dangerous. Now down here we can do another one, but it's in the water. And they're kind of vulnerable in the water. They take more damage if they get bombarded in the water. But at the same time, he has such a huge army. From what I've seen, I could be overreacting. Maybe. I don't really think so. I can take Octagon's garrison now. I don't care. Not above it or beyond. Motherfucker is gonna know it. He's so fucking dead, he has no idea. I mean, he's gonna figure out what I'm up to. He's got it. He ain't stupid. I might wait for them ships to get over to that side because it's, like I said, this is not a joke. This is going to be a real war. Real war. Yeah, sometimes there's some weird sounds in this game and sound glitches. Okay. I'm ready to turn something on here in the background.
Plants belong to another universe, a silent and seemingly simple world. They make food from sunshine, which in turn feeds the animal kingdom. But what if plants were keeping something from us? What if they have minds? What if they are intelligent? Scientists are asking these very questions. Do they perceive their environment? Do they have a memory? Could they have a nervous system? To these men and women, the great divide between the plant and animal world is not that great at all. Our investigation into the mind of plants begins with a mystery, a murder mystery. In the late 1980s, a serial killer was stalking the Limpopo savannah. At the time, there was a severe drought. The country was devastated. Water holes had dried up, and food became scarce. Only the tough and widely spread acacia provided any sign of hope to large herbivores such as the kudu. These beautiful and robust animals could nibble around the tree's defensive spikes, plucking its small green leaves. Death by starvation seemed averted. The hard times could be survived. But then something strange began to happen. Large numbers of healthy kudus suddenly dropped dead. Thousands littered the landscape. The deaths continued for months with no clues as to why. The kudus lived on game reserves and were an important source of income to their owners and the tourist industry. The cost was high for both animals and people.
It's very distressful to me to see such beautiful animals just lying dead for no reason. So I decided I've got the time and I'm going to find out what it is.
I found another dead kudu.
We've lost 34 kudus. And the strange thing is that they die and they don't look bad.
We were very worried at that stage on this situation there. And that's why we've spent the money to try and determine, because the autopsies are expensive.
The veterinarian through the autopsy couldn't say anything. He couldn't find anything wrong with the animal. He said he made a suggestion we should actually look further into the process and see if we can't get any university involved.
The job of detective fell on this man, Wouter van Hoven, a distinguished conservation biologist and specialist in great African herbivores.
Of all life on Earth, there's something more mysterious, yet more vital to our survival than anything else. Its birth is violent. Much of its life is hidden underground. And only at the end of its life cycle does it reveal its identity. The mushroom. I'm Professor Richard Forty. I've been fascinated by mushrooms all my life.
Nice find.
I love to collect and study them. Many people think of mushrooms just as something to eat, or maybe as decoration in folk tales. But nothing could be further from the truth. They have a secret life, so magical, so weird, that it defies imagination, and I'm going to reveal it as never before. I've set up my own lab to unlock the mysteries of mushrooms. Oh, look at that! They're like geysers. I'll discover their astonishing powers. What makes them the fastest, the largest, and some of the deadliest living things on the planet. Half a cap will kill you, and kill you slowly and painfully. And I'll meet the people turning those powers to our advantage to create new medicines and new materials.
The innovation we have here is the future of energy production and even devices and products like your iPhone.
To discover what gives mushrooms their extraordinary abilities, I'm going to follow their story from birth through life to death. A story so strange it seems almost alien, yet it will reveal why mushrooms are crucial to all life on Earth, and why they have a powerful connection to you and me. The only place many of us encounter mushrooms is here. Cultivated edible varieties like these are all most of us think about when it comes to mushrooms. We Brits can't get enough. It's a multi-million-pound business in the UK. But there's so much more to mushrooms than this fine example in the fresh food counter. This mushroom is just one species from an enormous kingdom, the kingdom of the fungi. And fungi are hidden away in all kinds of food products in this supermarket in ways you wouldn't expect. Look hard enough, and every aisle reveals evidence of how fungi underpin modern living. Cheese. My favourite, Stilton cheese. Well, it's blue, and the blue is a fungus. A lot of fizzy drinks have citric acid in them, and that's produced by a fungus called Aspergillus niger in huge quantities. Many detergents also contain citric acid, just like fizzy drinks. Ah, here's soy sauce, bread, corn, chocolate, fruit juices. Well, sometimes they have a bitter taste, which can be removed by another fungus. Salmon, red salmon, a red colour, I'm afraid, is sometimes due to a fungus called Pfaffia. Some of the protein in pet foods, which keeps your animals healthy, is actually produced by fungi. And of course, booze. The fermenting activity of Saccharomyces, turning sugars into alcohol. Clearly, our supermarket shop just wouldn't be the same without fungi. They're hidden away in all sorts of ways in the products. They must have a series of special biochemical tricks up their sleeve. But how exactly is it that they seem to turn up everywhere and affect so many parts of our lives? To begin to answer that question, I'm going to a place where I encounter fungi in all their forms. Head out into any woodland like this one in the Scottish borders, and if you look hard enough, you'll start finding them everywhere. To me, they're fascinating. Some may think they look like any other plant, but in fact, they're a different organism altogether. Fungi evolved as a kingdom in their own right, distinct from plants and animals, over 1.5 billion years ago. It's thought that in variety, they outnumber plants by at least 10 to 1. And searching for them is my favourite pastime. Some people might think of autumn as a rather gloomy time of year, but for me, it's pure joy. I can take my basket, I can go into the woods, and I can do my mushroom foraying. I've been doing it for decades. What's the thrill of it? Well, to the left of the path, to the right of the path, dozens of different kinds of fungi are erupting. But I suppose the most primeval feeling, the basic one, is still the thrill of discovery, the thrill of the chase. You may not realise that what we call the mushroom is, in fact, just one type of fungus. It's the form that we are most familiar with, and it's certainly the easiest to recognise.
head of a mushroom is its cap. And many have a stalk. Look underneath the cap, and you'll often find a set of sharp ridges known as gills.
Aha! Well, now this is, of course, the archetypal mushroom. It's the one that the gnomes sit on top of. It's the fly agaric. I can see other species really, really close to hand. This is the king of the edible mushrooms, the cep, the penny bun, porcini. The fact it's got so many names is a measure of just how highly regarded it is as an edible fungus. It's one of the best.
But as well as the quintessential mushroom,
A bit hazardous.
if you look a little harder, you'll find a host of other fungi that don't look like mushrooms at all.
Ah, well now here's something completely different. Perhaps doesn't look like a fungus at first sight to people. It's one of the coral fungi. This is an ear fungus. They're still fungi, but they're very, very different sort of fungi. Yellow brain fungus. Doesn't look like anything from this earth, really, does it? It's the beefsteak fungus. And you can see why. It looks a bit like raw liver.
In fact, this organism can take so many weird and wonderful forms, knowing what it is you're looking at can sometimes be a challenge, even for an experienced foragger like me.
Wow, now that is something really weird. I'm not quite sure what's going on. It's absolutely extraordinary. That's one coming back to the lab.
Almost every foray I go on, I find something new and intriguing. Time to take a closer look at exactly what's in my basket. This is our specially built mushroom lab, where I'll be unlocking the mysteries of fungi with the help of mycologist Dr. Patrick Hickey.
This is quite a setup we've got here.
Their first secret is their identity.
So here we are with our haul back from the woods. And what a variety we've got in the basket. Of course, we notice things like the colour, of course.
The smell. Oh yeah, it's got a really sweet smell to it, a very sweet odour.
So fungus identification uses all your senses.
It's a very sensory experience. But there's another way we can really narrow down the mystery of a mushroom and positively identify it, and that's by doing something called a spore print. Every mushroom has its own unique spore print. And to do a spore print, we cut the stem off and then place the cap onto a piece of paper and just leave it for a few hours. And when you come back and lift it up, you'll see the mushroom has deposited a layer of spores. And they look just like fingerprints. It's a bit like taking a fingerprint from a mushroom.
These spores are like the seeds of a mushroom, and the patterns they create can reveal some surprises, even when two mushrooms appear to look the same.
So here we've got two similar looking,
They look almost the same, yeah.
white mushrooms, but reveal the spores. One's startlingly white and the other very black.
Yeah, it's a key in the identification of the mushroom.
So we have such a variety of colours. We've got a sort of purple here. We've got cream, we've got white, very pure white, rust brown, even pinkish.
Yeah.
And I have to say, what a beautiful pattern it makes too. I mean, these aesthetically extremely pleasing.
They're wonderful. They're just like the silhouettes of a mushroom. And that colour of the spore print is unique to that particular type of mushroom. And they don't change throughout the mushroom's life cycle.
The spore prints reveal that mushrooms are more varied and complex than they might appear. Their world is mysterious and little known, yet they have the power to affect our lives in unexpected ways. One of the most striking displays of that power takes us to the most unlikely place. This is Mark Gilchrist, a consultant pharmacist at St Mary's Hospital, London. He spends much of his day administering and prescribing the most widely used type of drug on the planet, antibiotics.
Antibiotics are tremendously important in our fight against infection. And up to about 30% of patients within a hospital setting can be on antibiotics at any one time. And that's used to treat things like pneumonias, to simple skin and soft tissue infections, and to prevent surgical site infections post-operatively.
The invention of antibiotics has been a game changer for medicine and mankind. And we owe it all to fungi. In 1928, scientist Alexander Fleming was carrying out research at St Mary's. He was studying the Staphylococcus bacterium and left some samples on his desk before heading off on holiday, expecting them to grow and develop while he was away.
When Fleming returned from his holiday to resume his research on bacteria here in this lab, he noticed something extraordinary.
His bacteria samples were dead. They had been completely destroyed by fungi. Intrigued by why this had happened, Fleming examined his samples further.
He realized that a fungus spore, possibly from a lab below, must have landed on the gel plate and germinated.
The spore had rapidly started to feed on the contents of the dish, starving and ultimately killing the bacteria. The significance wasn't lost on Fleming. This could be a new way to fight bacterial infection inside the human body. His discovery led to the creation of the world's first antibiotic, penicillin. And it only happened thanks to some tiny spores from a fungus carried on the breeze. But to understand how those spores came to be there at all, we need to delve deeper into the secret world of fungi, right back to the start of their life cycle, to the moment a new fungus begins.
I've come to Scotland to see something I've always wanted to see but never have, although I've rehearsed it many times in my mind's eye.
This is one of the largest mushroom farms in the UK, and inside each of these polytunnels, there's a spectacular natural phenomenon taking place, the birth of fungi. It's a magical process, normally invisible, but tonight I'm going to see it clearly for the first time.
Well, to a mushroom person, of course, this is like being in heaven. And everywhere you look, it's extraordinary. This laser torch picks out little white specks. They're so numerous. This is like shining a beam up into the Milky Way. Billions upon billions of spores in the air all around us. And they're ubiquitous, so they're going up to the ceiling, they're going out of the door, they're doubtless going into my lungs. But if you want a graphic demonstration of how prolific mushrooms are, here it is.
So this is how most fungi begin life. The mushroom spews out many millions of spores every hour for as long as it remains above the ground, each of them carrying the potential to be a new fungus. It's mesmerizing to watch, but I want to know exactly what's going on here. And to do that, I'll need more than a laser light. Back in the mushroom lab, Patrick can reveal the hidden mechanisms of mushroom birth.
A mushroom, also known as a fruit body, really is just the reproductive purpose is to produce spores. So to look at these in more detail, what I'm going to do is take a very thin section through this mushroom cap and put it onto a microscope slide.
Oh, there we go. Ah.
Right.
So yeah, now that's the business, isn't it?
Yeah, so the large cylindrical kind of clear part of the cell is the basidium, and those little spiky bits protruding from it are called the stigmata, and they hold the spores in place. Now, eventually, when those spores have fully ripened, they'll drop off down from the mushroom. That whole structure, including the spores, is about the width of a human hair. And remember, these gills are packed with them. They're completely lined with a layer of these basidia, continually producing spores. It's a production line.
It's an extraordinary thought, isn't it, that this tiny object, just a few thousandths of a millimetre long, contained the potentiality for a new mushroom colony.
Exactly.
This constant production line, forming and releasing spores, is exactly what I saw so vividly in action at the mushroom farm. But that's just one way mushrooms can spread their spores. Others do it in a completely different way. This is an orange peel fungus, and it's part of a large group that fire their spores vertically, with explosive results, as we can see here when the action is slowed down 600 times.
look at that. They're like geysers erupting.
The spores are incredibly prolific throughout the course of a day. And over the lifetime of that fungus, we're in the tens to hundreds of millions.
Well, that's extraordinary footage. I've never, ever seen anything so graphically displaying the way fungi get rid of their spores.
It's a truly impressive fungus.
These fungi can reload and fire time and time again, often for many days on end. And how that works was a brilliant discovery made by someone you wouldn't expect. Beatrix Potter is famous for penning The Tale of Peter Rabbit, but what's less well known is that she was one of the leading mushroom biologists of her time. Both Potter and pioneering biologist Arthur Buller spent much of their lives trying to find out how some mushrooms release their spores. They discovered that a tiny drop of fluid, now known as Buller's drop, forms at the base of every spore. As the spore ripens and begins to detach, the Buller's drop fuses with a second tiny water droplet that forms at the side of the spore. Like two raindrops joining together on a microscopic process, all takes place in a few millionths of a second, and is key to how many fungi reproduce. But of them all, there's one particular species that's a record breaker. You may think that the fastest organism on the planet is a cheetah or maybe a peregrine falcon, but you'd be wrong. Allowing for scale, the speediest organism on the planet is actually a tiny fungus. It grows on top of cowpats. It's called Pilobolus crystallinus, or the hat-thrower fungus, and no other species demonstrates better the importance of spore release mechanism. This little fungus feeds on the dung of herbivores, but when the supply of nutrients from one pile has been exhausted, it needs to move on, and to do that, it has to get out of the dung and onto new blades of grass. That's the equivalent of you or I trying to throw a tennis ball over the Eiffel Tower. But then you or I can't do this. Using water drop acceleration, these spore capsules, seen as little black hats, can be fired at a speed of up to 40 miles per hour in just 2 millionths of a second, pulling an astonishing 20,000 Gs in the process. The little hat-thrower fungus is a wonderful example of the sophistication of fungus evolution. It throws its spore body more than 1,000 times its own length into clear grass, away from cowpats, so that the cows will come along, graze the grass, incorporate the spores, and so propagate another generation. The hat-thrower shows just how ingenious fungi are when it comes to reproduction. They will go to extraordinary lengths to ensure their own future. It's the key to why fungi have become such a dominant life form, with such vast numbers of species all over the planet. And it's certainly a talent to which humankind owes a great deal. But as impressive as spore dispersal might be, it's just the beginning of the fungus's life story. It's the next stage that truly reveals why they are so vital to all life on Earth. So far, we've just been looking at the fruit body of the mushroom. Indeed, I suppose to most people, they think that is the mushroom. But it's only part of the story. To discover how mushrooms relate to so many other organisms on our planet, we have to go further. We have to go underground. You'd be forgiven for thinking that what we see above the ground is the main part of the fungus. But in fact, the vast majority of the organism is hidden underground. It's a huge web of tiny threads spreading out in search of food. And the only way many fungi can get what they need is by attaching themselves to other organisms and engaging in a two-way exchange of nutrients. It's a process that results in one of the most complex yet crucial relationships in the natural world. To discover how this works, I'm meeting Kew Gardens mycologist Bryn Dentinger.
Anywhere from 70 to 90% of all plants on Earth will form a very special, intimate relationship with fungi. And the fungi will attach themselves to the plant roots, either directly penetrating the roots, or sometimes they will form sheaths on the outside. They will envelop the root like a kind of glove. And this is where the nutrient exchange takes place between the fungus and the root.
This nutrient exchange works both ways. The fungus feeds on sugars from the plant that it needs to grow, and in return gives back water and minerals that the plant is unable to absorb enough of itself.
I'm going to lift up this pine seedling here, and you can see where I'm pointing with my pinky, that white fuzz.
Oh yeah, okay.
Those are the fungal filaments, and it is completely covering the roots of this pine tree right here. And it extends over a much larger surface area than the roots can possibly cover. And this gives them access to all kinds of nutrients and water in the soil. So they can extract nitrogen and phosphorus in particular from the soil and provide those to the plant, which the plant will then exchange that for sugars that it produces through photosynthesis.
And the two together make for a better plant?
A better plant and a better fungus, healthier soil.
So it's a win-win situation for both.
It's a win-win situation for both partners and, in fact, for the entire world.
We're going to look for evidence of this vital relationship in the wild.
Well, we can't see them, but all around us there are these unseen fungal partners.
They're invisible to us when we just take a nice stroll along a path, but they're all around us.
Should we have a go?
Let's do it. I think I've got some.
Well, I mean, you don't have to search for it. You can see the white tips here.
Yeah, it's very obvious, yeah. But every one of these tiny little side-branching roots is covered in fungus.
There's a fascinating and fundamental relationship between fungi and land plants, not just here in Kew and every park in Britain, but in every field. Without this relationship, plants couldn't thrive. It's impossible to overstate its importance.
So how exactly does this hidden process happen? To find out, Patrick has been capturing it in action, starting from the moment a spore hits the ground.
The primary mission of a fungal spore is to feed and find food resources. Now, under the right conditions, the spore starts to germinate and grow. And that's what we can see here. So we place some spores into a droplet of water, and as you can see, they're starting to swell. There's a little bit of movement starting to go on inside.
Oh, yeah.
And already you can see this little bud emerging, and that little bud is the beginnings of a fungal hypha.
So what is a hypha?
A hypha is the feeding part of a fungus, the feeding tube. And the hypha goes in search of water and food, and will continue growing and branching until it eventually establishes a colony, a fungal colony.
Does it grow very fast?
Once a hypha finds its food source, it can develop very quickly and form what we call a mycelium.
The mycelium is the scientific name for the fungus's feeding network. Here, magnified 500 times, we can see one starting to form as many hyphae begin to web together. Essentially, it is a fungus's root system, a complex series of feeding tubes. It's not unlike a microscopic human digestive system, processing food that allows it to grow. Within these tubes are the nutrients that are a fungus's entire future.
And you can see the network forming now.
Yeah, and this is in the center of the colony. You have this branch network that keeps on feeding nutrients through the colony and sharing its water and resources amongst
And that's only 0.5 millimetre square.
Roughly 0.5 millimetre is the sort of field of view that we're looking at here, and it's very much like a road network. We've got these kind of main motorways, we've got lots of little side routes in there, and we've got flow of nutrients, water, and it's very dynamic. For example, if I was to break one of these tracks, fungus would very quickly adapt and form new connections.
And form new connections and new routes. And it's extraordinary how bustling it is. Of course, I can now see what we saw with Bryn Dentinger, how efficient these hyphae are at gathering nutrients, moving through the soil.
Absolutely, and even in the most dry soil environments, fungi are able to draw up the moisture from the soil and transfer it into the plants through this cooperation.
It is extraordinary, extraordinary footage.
Although the mycelium is almost entirely invisible to us, it makes up the vast majority of the organism. And its size can be truly breathtaking. So big, in fact, it can often extend for miles. The biggest organism in the world is not the blue whale, but a mycelium that spreads across an incredible 2,384 acres in Oregon's Blue Mountains. It's called Armillaria amelia, or the honey fungus, and this example is thought to be over 2,000 years old. It's a mind-boggling example of how far a mycelium can grow. But it also reveals just how destructive a feeding fungus can be.
These are clumps of honey fungus. It's the same fungus that spread inexorably through the forests of Oregon. And it demonstrates a very different, some would say sinister, relationship between mycelium and trees.
Like the balanced nutrient exchange that we see between most fungi and their plant partners, honey fungus takes much more from its host than it gives. It consumes all the sugars it needs, but crucially it doesn't give back enough water and nutrients to help the tree grow properly. As a result, the greedy mycelium of this fungus thrives, while the tree slowly weakens.
Honey fungus is a slow killer. It advances from tree to tree on hidden threads. As our tree population ages and some sickens, the rise of honey fungus is inexorable.
But it's not the biggest threat to our plants and trees. There's another species of fungus whose hunger is even more deadly. I've come to Norfolk to find evidence of a fungus that's very difficult to see, but whose eating habits are threatening to wipe out one of Britain's oldest trees.
Just a few years ago, a new killer arrived in Britain. Ash dieback disease, or Chalara fraxinia, to give it its scientific name. And no fungus better demonstrates the greed of mycelium for nourishment. And if it has its way, maybe magnificent forest trees like this ash may yet become just a part of history.
David Bolt knows all too well just how destructive this fungus has become.
And there's quite a lot of dieback in here, isn't there? Yeah. And this was one of the first woods where we discovered it. What we're finding now is that there's over 500 cases in the wider environment. And as we do more in-depth surveys, more and more cases are coming to the fore.
Take me through the symptoms.
Well, the first thing to look for is this, the black leaves, which we've got here, and we've got a really good example on this little young tree here. The leaves have died, but they're black, they really don't look healthy, and they're hanging onto the tree.
I noticed they die from the top too, so that dead up here, but still green down here.
Yes, you know, it's called die back, and that's a good way to think of it, yes. That we have the tree slowly dying back. Other symptoms are these diamond-shaped lesions. The fungus lands on the leaves, the mycelia come in and works its way up and down the cells of the tree and forms these very particular diamond-shaped lesions.
This process is rather eerily called necrotrophy, which means eating the dead. The feeding hyphae of ash dieback attach themselves to their tree hosts in the same way as other fungi, but they obtain their sugars without providing any nutrients or water in return. It's all one-way traffic and has a fatal outcome.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just have a look inside.
Oh, yeah.
So
you can see discoloration. It's absolutely patent.
So the disease has entered here, and this is the fungal mycelia, which are starting to work its way inside the tree. The mycelia get inside all the cells that transport the water up and down the tree and stop the water transport. And so the tree effectively dies of thirst, if you like.
It's a sad end to one of our most beautiful and elegant forest trees.
It really, really is, yes. I mean, we'll probably lose a generation of ash, but let's hope we see that coming back.
Ash dieback demonstrates just what happens when the delicate balance between plant and fungus gets out of kilter. And that's what allows this disease to spread so far and so fast.
It also shows just what a voracious eater fungal mycelium can be. But though this unstoppable appetite can be deadly in the natural world, some scientists are looking to turn it to our advantage. This is Eben Bayer, an entrepreneur based in New York. He noticed something intriguing that happens when some mycelium spreads out in search of food.
First time I saw mycelium in action was holding clumps of wood chips together on my family farm. And rather than falling apart, they'd be held together by these white fiber strands. One night sitting at home on my futon in my apartment, had this crazy idea about, hey, mycelium seems to grow and glue the forest floor together. Maybe we can use it as a glue.
Eben saw huge potential in this binding property of mycelium. He used it to create a new kind of packaging, one that he believes could ultimately become an eco-friendly alternative to some plastics.
Just in packaging alone, there's like billions of dollars of styrofoam used every year, somewhere between $3.5 and $5 billion of styrene. And the biggest issue with plastics is at their end of life. And with our material, you get something that at the end of its useful life can be composted, right? Your packaging becomes a nutrient for your neighborhood, not a pollutant.
To make his new material, Eben mimics what happens in nature. He takes some ground corn stalks and seeds them with fungus spores. The spores germinate and begin to feed on the stalks, breaking down and digesting them so the mycelium can start to grow. The mixture is then placed inside a mold and left for the mycelium to perform its biological magic.
So they'll sit on a rack like this for anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. It doesn't look like anything's happening, but the mycelium is already going to work, growing and extending out from every one of these particles and building a strong, tough network. And within 24 hours, this part will look a little white, and that's the mycelium gluing everything together. So this is a finished corner block. It's been grown in our production process, it's been molded, and all of this came from that loosey-goosey agricultural byproduct you saw at the beginning. Pretty incredible, huh? What we've done with mycelium here, which is basically leveraging a living organism to create really great technology, is where the excitement is, that's where the innovation is, and that's where the solutions are going to be for the next 100 years.
So the mushroom mycelium could help us tackle the global problem of plastic waste. But Eben's work also demonstrates another important trait of the feeding mycelium. While some fungi feed on living organisms, others only eat those that are dead. These fungi are able to break down and digest organic waste, and in doing so, recycle it. This process is called saprotrophy, and it's absolutely vital in the natural world.
In this damp wood, the litter of leaves, indeed every twig, is being consumed by mycelium that breaks down the cellulose and other compounds. Even wood can be digested by fungi. The hard lignin that gives the wood its strength can be consumed and the wood reduced to little more than rubble. Were it not for the relentless activity of mycelium, in fact, the whole planet would be covered with a mass of undigested scrub.
It's hard to overstate the importance of saprotrophic fungi. They have successfully recycled the world's natural waste for hundreds of millions of years, making entire ecosystems habitable for animal and plant life. So how do they achieve this crucial trick?
So Patrick, let's talk rot. Few people realise just how important as saprotrophs fungi are in nature. How does it work?
Well, fungi are really quite invasive. The fungi have this mycelium which penetrates deep into the waste, and unlike us, our stomach's internal, fungi secrete their digestive juices out into the environment and start breaking down the complex molecules, things like cellulose, into more simpler forms.
And this is via a myriad of those little hyphal threads.
That's right. And to demonstrate just how effective saprotrophic fungi are at breaking down organic matter, I've put several days of kitchen work.
Just sort of sinking down.
Yeah, lots of juice exuding from the vegetables.
So the invisible thread mycelium are getting in there, breaking vegetables and the other organic waste into something they can use.
The other important thing to note here is that when all these vegetables did go into the beaker, they already had spores on them, so they were already preceded.
Because spores are everywhere.
Exactly. When you bring the food back from the supermarket, it'll already have a coating of a whole cocktail of different spores. And as soon as those fungi are in a slightly warm environment, it becomes quite a feeding frenzy, if you like. So, Richard, I'm going to show you the results of the one that I prepared 2 weeks ago.
Well, it couldn't be much clearer than that.
Yeah, I mean, look how far it's gone down. This was the start point, and
at least a third.
It's gone down about a third, and I'd expect within another 2 weeks to be almost to the bottom. If this process wasn't happening, we would just be surrounded by organic waste matter.
Of vegetables.
Exactly.
What it does show is just what makes the fungi such efficient seekers after, scavengers after nutrition.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
The brilliant way the mycelium of a saprotrophic fungus uses digestive juices, just like humans, to break down waste makes it a recycling machine like no other. And it doesn't stop there. For as saprotrophic fungi recycle organic matter, they're performing a key role in creating healthy soil. Soil that can, in turn, sustain new plant life. And that's also a home for a host of other life forms, tiny microorganisms that live within it. And for some fungi, the arrival of these new guests is just another feeding opportunity. These oyster mushrooms, or Pleurotus, have mycelium that breaks down the wood in rotting logs. They're quite efficient at doing this, but they have a shortage of one essential element, nitrogen. And to make good this deficiency, they've evolved a very special trick. From the end of some of its hyphae, the oyster mushroom emits tiny lassos that secrete a powerful toxin. And it does this for one reason: nematode worms. These tiny organisms live within the logs and happen to be rich in the nitrogen that the hungry mushroom needs. The oyster mushroom lures the nematodes towards their tiny lassos before enveloping them. Once trapped, it's curtains for the little worm and dinner for the mushroom as it gets the nitrogen-rich fluid it needs. The oyster mushroom's rather gruesome feeding trick demonstrates yet again just how sophisticated a fungus can be when it comes to getting the food it needs. It's a talent that once again we humans are looking to harness. Over in Washington State, mycologist Paul Stamets has turned to our hungry friend the oyster mushroom in the hope he can use it on a truly grand scale to tackle some of our most pressing environmental problems, such as chemical pollution.
One of my great realizations in life is that habitats have immune systems just like we do. But mushrooms are the bridges between the two. These things unravel and break down large molecules that are very useful for other members of the community. That course of that decomposition has many different properties that we can use for breaking down toxic waste.
That's good, Dave.
Paul discovered that mushroom mycelium can break down the hydrocarbons present in much chemical waste. It's a process he calls bioremediation. The mushroom is greedily eating the pollutants away. It looks convincing in the lab, but does it work in practice? Paul's theory was recently put to the test on an industrial level when a heavily polluted petrochemical site was seeded with oyster mushroom mycelium. The work was carried out by environmental engineer Howard Sprouse.
Yeah, bring her down a little for me.
After just 2 days, the team found that their polluted pile had been transformed by the mushroom mycelium and was now teeming with new life.
Well, this is interesting. We've got lots of worms in here now. That's a good sign. If it drops any more, we're going to be able to use this soil anywhere. The contaminant is gone. The decomposition process that the fungi have started is continued by other soil microorganisms, and you end up with soil that's richer than it was when you started.
Paul's study shows that oyster mushroom mycelium can not only digest chemical waste, it also manages to create an entirely new ecosystem in the process.
At the time when the Earth is suffering from toxin exposure, erosion and of habitats, overpopulation, deforestation, loss of soil integrity, mushrooms present themselves with unique properties that can address all those problems with a single group. And that's what I find so exciting, is that the solutions are literally underfoot.
Paul's work shows just how great the potential of fungus mycelium might be. Its hidden underground threads act upon their natural environment in truly remarkable ways we are only now beginning to realise. But as vital as it could be to us, the mycelium's feeding quest has one simple goal: to produce its fruiting body, bringing the organism to the end of its life cycle. We've seen how mycelium can form complex feeding webs, and how the mycelium underpins so many of Earth's ecosystems. Yet, that mycelium itself has only one purpose: to fulfill its own life cycle and to lead once again to the...
Okay, I need to wait one more turn, actually. I gotta get these guys a little further over, because he does have some Navy here that I can take out. I need to do as much damage in one turn as I can, without resorting to nuclear weapons. I only use nuclear weapons in a retaliatory scenario. So, yeah. Then I'm gonna eat and go to bed. That's what I'm thinking. Just out of curiosity. Let's see how this missile cruiser fleet versus nuclear submarine. This jet bomber might get damaged. That missile cruiser. Or even get shot down. I don't know. Try to get some damage there. Oh, could have finished off that missile. Alright, well, I don't want to get caught in this. This is hard to get caught in up there, because I can just sit here and fight them. Shits and giggles. See who would win in a straight fight between destroyer armada and nuclear submarine fleet. Generally, submarines are more powerful when attacking than when defending. Historically, in civilization games. Just for your amusement, before I get it. There's a 3-for-1. See if the cloud will show up. Graphics are funny. Sometimes they go off, sometimes they're there. You don't get to see it. But yeah, I can get 3 cities in one loop. Alright, guys.